Approximately 500,000 immigrants who live in New York City are undocumented. Of these, about half are uninsured. But a new pilot program called Direct Access might change things. According to Mayor de Blasio, next spring, New York will become one of the first major U.S. cities to expand low-cost health care to uninsured immigrants, regardless of their legal status.
Now to give us some background on the issue and its potential impact on both the city and its undocumented citizens, we want to welcome Claudia Calhoun, the Director of Health Advocacy for the New York Immigrant Coalition. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, Claudia, in collaboration with the Hastings Center last year, you put out a report on access to healthcare in the immigrant community. Yeah. What were those findings?
So our report with the Hastings Center, which is a bioethics and policy center, what we really found was that New York City has already a very good infrastructure that provides services to a lot of people that don't have insurance through HHC and through a really rich network of federally qualified health centers. So we have a lot. We're starting from a good place in this work.
Good base.
But we do know that there are real challenges, especially for access to specialty care. If someone has multiple chronic diseases, we know that there are real challenges in terms of wait times, the capacity of these great institutions to get to everyone and get them in a timely manner is a challenge. Even though HHC and these centers are making important strides in that, we know that people still sometimes wait a long time to get an appointment, especially for something specialized. If someone is discharged from the hospital, that's where you start to see a lot of the gaps in terms of something like physical therapy or durable medical goods at home. So you have a spectrum of services that are very good and very important, but we know there are huge gaps. And in the end, it's not good for those immigrants that aren't able to get health care, and it's not good for the city, it's not good for the taxpayers, because a lot of times they won't get care until they're too sick, or they'll end up in the emergency room. So it's all about closing the gaps so that people can stay healthier.
So you just hit on it there. There's that whole an ounce of prevention argument. So we've seen a lot of immigrants who don't have a regular insurance or a regular doctor using hospitals and emergency rooms when things get really bad.
Right. Yeah, that's something you see. I mean, and people don't have what we call a medical home. They don't have a provider that they trust, that they know that they're going to feel comfortable with. They may not have a provider that speaks their language. And so one of the things that's really exciting about the Direct Access program is that it really is sort of centered around linking people who enroll in the program who don't have insurance to a medical home, which will be their base for sort of making sure that they get all the services they need, and that there's a care coordination component built in there that makes sure they don't fall through the cracks.
Okay, so you touched on it already. Tell us more about the pilot program, when it would start, how many people it would include.
I mean, the details of the pilot program, a lot of it is still to be announced. I know pretty much just what was in the press release, but from the city, which came out last week and was very exciting. But we do know that it will focus on areas where you do have a big population of people who are uninsured, remain uninsured, and the city's made estimates that they probably are undocumented as well. And so it will focus on two particular areas, I believe, and the idea is that it will draw on HHC facilities, so the public hospital facilities, but will also link to services outside of those in the federally qualified health centers that are in those areas, and that it will really sort of build on the work of IDNYC in terms of in using that infrastructure and that sort of, which has been wildly popular and hugely successful, and we believe especially among undocumented populations.
And they're starting with about 1,000 folks for the pilot to chart them.
Yeah, that's the target, and the idea is to see how it works for that population, and then from there, hopefully to scale up and have it really reach a larger number of people.
Is that a big enough pilot, you think?
I mean,
to really know if it's working?
I think that they can tell something meaningful from working with that population. I think it's a question of whether they are able to enroll the people, and whether they are able to. I mean, a lot of it's sort of happening all at once. Like they're going to be enrolling and doing outreach and getting people plugged in and sort of rolling out these enhanced services. So probably you wouldn't want them to shoot too big and then so I think we're in support of that scope of work. I think what the challenge is how it's messaged, how the outreach is done, how simple it is to get plugged in, how well they're able to communicate to people why this is meaningful, why this is value added for them as someone who might need to go to the doctor. And then, of course, whether the more challenging thing is whether they're able to, show the kind of impact that will bring in, that will support sort of a larger investment down the road.
So what kind of pushback has there been? You spoke about the value add, and the value add is sort of clear for someone who's uninsured now and can get access. But for the person who's saying, I pay my taxes, I'm here, I'm documented, why should I be concerned with paying for people who shouldn't even be here to be going to the doctor, and where's the money coming from?
I think this has all happened this was really just released, so we're sort of just beginning the public conversation. I'm sure that's the kind of thing that we will want to prepare to message around and sort of counter because people do need to understand. People do need to understand where the investment's coming from, and they do need to understand that it's going to be sustainable. And so that will be. I think the thing about New York City specifically is it already makes a tremendous investment through HHC. Like a lot of what we're talking about isn't sort of new services.
Health and hospitals.
The
city. So if you are a New Yorker or you just happen to be here, whatever your situation is, one could walk into a New York City hospital and get a level of care.
Yeah, that's correct. And you can already get it very cheaply because HHC has what they call their options program, which provides subsidized care up to 400% of the federal poverty level, which is really very generous. And so a lot of it is more weaving together sort of what is already in place, which may help with the messaging.
You don't have to present with like, this is my Social Security card. Please take care of my broken arm.
No, that's correct. No, they don't ask questions. And I think the challenge is more in terms of access now is just the fact that people may, like I said, they may have to wait, or they might get frustrated, or they it might take a long time to get an appointment. And so that's the idea, is that this would make the services the city is already administering more efficient. And the other thing I can say is that we do have some good models. This is sort of, if this happens the way it's envisioned, it will be one of the larger scale things. But Healthy San Francisco is San Francisco's version of this. And they have a lot of success to point to in terms of bringing people into the system, in some cases reducing emergency room use in favor of getting people plugged in with primary care services. So we do have a lot, and that was sort of one of the other findings of our report, was that there were a lot of things that have been done in other cities that can be drawn on for New York City, for the scale that we need in New York City.
So a second ago, you mentioned San Francisco. I know that, State Senator Ricardo Lara out in Cali is proposing a bill that's already passed in their state senate there, saying we want to expand Obamacare options to people who are undocumented and let them pay in essentially. So there was the big "you lie" comment back when the president said, no, this is true, it will not extend. And to that end, it's true, they announced that 115,000 people were thrown off of insurance plans as of September 30th because they didn't respond to the government's request to verify their citizenship or some kind of immigration status to prove that they were Americans. Do you think that Governor Cuomo would go for something like that and champion this on the state level?
So I'm so glad you asked me about that, and there's a lot packed into that question. We are, the NYIC, along with Healthcare for All New York and Make the Road New York and a bunch of other organizations, we are going to be really trying to get a campaign going for some sort of state coverage. And that was one of the things that we also highlighted in our report, was the fact that even with this direct access system, at the end of the day, for the sustainability of HHC and sort of services, you really do need some kind of coverage mechanism that the state would finance. And also in the ACA is that you have some cuts to what's called disproportionate hospital share funding, which is a long acronym, but basically means that the safety net is in danger of losing some of the resources that allow it to function. And so that's why it is going to be important for us to work at the state level to get some kind of coverage for this hundreds of thousands of people that remain sort of outside of anything. And so we are sort of gearing up for that. And it's a super interesting question as to whether it would be some sort of some sort of like extension of the marketplace that would sort of step outside of the federal restrictions,
Right.
or whether we would work with the state to create or expand another program, perhaps like the Essential Plan, which is going to be starting next year, to create a sort of state finance version of that new program that would allow people to buy in. And there's all sorts of questions in what that would look like and what the affordability for that population would be. But the big answer to your question is we absolutely do need to work on that. This is going to be value added in the meantime, but over time, really, New York State does need to make an investment in making sure that healthcare reform happens for all of its residents.
Absolutely. Do you have a sense right now of what that buy-in is going to be like?
I think we don't at this stage. I think part of our goal is really to raise awareness among all the allies that we can, and work with potential allies in the Assembly and the Senate, and to sort of try to be poised for a moment when we might be able to move something forward.
So if we're keeping it in the State House, you're with the New York Immigrant Coalition. So do you think that this is an easier sell or like a DREAM Act kind of thing? Is education versus healthcare one that we should like be putting a lot of energy behind if you had to invest in one? Is this more a heartstrings thing?
I think there is. I think obviously there are more arguments for both issues,
Right.
and there certainly are economic arguments for both issues as well, like why it's good for us to invest in education, and like the ability of young people to
Become doctors.
Right. So it's hard for me to sort of parse between the two, like which I would say is going to be an easier lift, and obviously the DREAM Act is something.
You gotta pick one if you want to put all of the resources behind it. Is there a feeling?
I think that's part of the challenge is that the DREAM Act we haven't been successful with yet. We will continue to work on it. With healthcare, this is sort of the conversation we haven't sort of raised the profile of this conversation yet. And hopefully there will be ways to tie that work together and maybe sort of create sort of proposals that are, like sort of a portfolio of projects that are in the end good for everyone in New York State, like education and healthcare together. And just thinking about it from like this idea of sort of a health and all policies thing, like education is good for, increasing educational opportunities is good for health outcomes, and vice versa. So it'll be interesting.
I was being facetious. You should never have to choose between education or health. Like
now
that's
he tells
success.
you.
But really, I just wonder if
Yeah.
we've seen that whole frenemies thing between the governor and the mayor, and if the mayor champions this, if the governor will step up, or is too focused on the White House to say, okay, I don't want to blend two things that go great together, immigration and Obamacare. It's like a minefield.
It is a minefield. What I'll say about this is that obviously it's tough to get. I don't think it's controversial to say it's tough to get things done in Albany, and we'll sort of have to see. But I do think, that we do know that we have key legislative allies, but we will be reaching out to them and sort of figuring out in terms of strategy what the answers to those questions you're posing are, and how we can best move forward sort of on all fronts.
All right.
We've also
Well, we
got the
hope
New
you
York
can do
Immigrant
that.
Coalition, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
job.
so much for coming on.
Absolutely.